Welcome to another episode of Women in Leadership, part of our INclusiverse series. I'm really excited today. I am joined by someone I consider a real friend, but actually when I think back to, we met in our early careers, and I was thinking back to the purpose of Women in Leadership, which is principally about what can some of us who have been in the work environment, maybe longer than others, give back from an experience and a learnings perspective to really help support young women, middle-aged women, any woman it would seem, just in terms of having more confidence and more intent when it comes to work. And so when I thought about this person, I thought actually they're going to bring a real richness to the episode. So I'm joined by Claire Andrews, like I said, good friend of mine. But hello, Claire.
Hello, Kirsti.
This is an interesting thing for us to do, isn't it? But I thought you'd be a good person to intro yourself. You know, a bit of a potted history around your career, what you've done, and then really pick up on, you know, learnings in life, learnings through work that can only help support women from a personal growth and a professional success perspective. So over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for even asking me. God, I'm absolutely thrilled. And I'm very, very delighted to be sat talking to you as well, because we have got a lot of history together.
I know. Haven't we just?
It's cool.
But for listeners, where did it all start?
My career has mainly been in the car industry. So I started out at Lotus Cars. I was doing events there, being brave, going around the world, doing motor shows, launching new vehicles, doing exciting things like Gumball Rally. And then I went from Lotus to Mazda, started there as events and brand at retail, where we met and did a lot of great stuff together.
Yeah.
Then I became a business manager, so I moved out of the marketing department into the sales department. From there, I moved into a senior marketing role and became the marketing director, and then moved into a technology business, made a leap after 19 years at Mazda, decided I would go and work in a technology business called OMI.
Something completely different.
Really different. They do electric vehicle chargers for domestic use for your home. It was a startup. I'd come from a corporation and went into a startup environment, which I always had a bit of an itch about. I always wanted to try it and didn't know if I could do it because I'd grown up in this corporate world, and it was just life-changing and brilliant.
I wanted to explore that more, but listening to you there, when I listened to, and it was a comprehensive overview in terms of the different roles within businesses. When we started out, you and I have been talking, I felt I had a hunger for work and a thirst to learn, and I wanted to succeed. But I don't think I had any real intention. And so listening there, what I'd love to know is if you were looking back at yourself 20 years ago, what would your advice be? How would you approach it? What would you take from that richness and really with intent look to craft the career strategy then to deliver for the now?
I think the first thing I would do is say to myself, pivot and try new things. I spent 19 years in one business, and whilst I had different roles, and that enabled me to stay interested and learning and developing my skill set. Actually, if I could have my time again, I would have moved to a different business much, much sooner. And I think pivoting and taking that chance at whatever age, because I've done it quite late in my career, which many people might think is a bit unusual. But I would definitely say go and try different things, broaden your experience. You get so much more from working with different people in different verticals.
That really resonates with me. As you know, I spent a long time in one business. Everything you've just said in terms of embracing change, not being scared to take that leap, that's what I'm reading. Was there something that held you back from doing that? When you said, I wish I'd done it sooner, what? Because I suspect that may be a challenge or a feeling that somebody else out there will have in relation to that.
There's never necessarily the right time. And one of the things that held me back was life. I wanted to be a mum. So at that point in time, before I fell pregnant, I was ready for the change. But then when I fell pregnant, I'm like, right, I'm going to sit tight because I wanted my maternity pay and benefits. And I have to say, that one of the benefits of a corporation is it was phenomenal. They looked after me brilliantly. But it wasn't the right moment to then go and find a new role for me. The next thing that held me back was return to work. So should I make a change again? Well, no, actually, I needed to settle back into the workplace as a mum. My life was like irrecognizable, and I needed to find a way of becoming a working parent. And then before the pandemic, I sat around a friend's house and said, I really see the future as electric vehicles, and I want to get into EV charging, and I want to make a difference. I'm ready in my life. There is a purpose inside me that wants to do something good. So when I look back, I've just worked forever and done all right and looked after my family, but I actually want to make a difference to the world. Sounds very grand, but we all do it in our own way, don't we?
Yeah, I think that becomes more important, doesn't it?
And for me, I spent many years in the car industry that has a lot of CO2 associated with it. So how could I try and reverse some of that? I wanted to do something that gave a better future for the planet and for my child and future generations. So EV charging. So I was ready to go and do that, but I didn't do it because a pandemic hit. So it was, again, I was kind of going back to work after the pandemic, having worked all the way through the pandemic and pivoted. And maybe that's where I got the inspiration and confidence that pivoting is okay. That was such a dramatic change we all lived through that change became more of a thing. So when I came back from that, a little while later, even though I had these new opportunities with flexible working and with a more omni-channel path to purchase, which the car industry was a little bit hesitant of before, it was time to do something different. And I took the leap and I went to OMI. So they're one of the things that held me back.
But it sounds like it was more to do with life stage and then circumstance that hit, as opposed to reflecting on my own experience. I think there was a degree around confidence and familiarity. When you're so enmeshed in the business you're in, and you're making a difference within that business, you stay. And I look back and I when you spoke to me about pivot being one of those kind of reflective moments to hand back to you 20 years ago, I have the same thing. I think mine is more rooted in just make the leap. Don't overthink it. And I think as women, you are prone to a degree of rationalization that others aren't. So perhaps it's pivot and have faith in yourself.
Just do it.
Yeah.
Like just spin the wheel, have a go.
What have you got to lose?
Exactly. And if you've thought carefully about the type of organisation you want to work within, the values they have, and if they match your values, then you're probably onto a good start.
Yeah.
So to tell myself that is, I was probably a bit like you. I was comfortable, or I had life stage circumstances, or there was something outside of our control that held me back. But don't.
Okay, so I love that. So Claire, 20 years ago, go for it. What's the next piece of recommendation then?
When you're looking for a new role and you want to do that pivot, to kind of build on that, know your superpower. What are you really good at?
That is
I
think that is a hard thing to answer though.
So ask other people.
Oh, okay. That particular kind of, I totally get where you're coming from, but back to superpower then.
I think you need to be aware of your superpower, what it is. We've all got different ones. So there's no judgment in what your superpower is. And when someone gives you that feedback, if you're brave enough to ask, then also just embrace it, because they may see something in you that you don't see. But for me, it was networking. I didn't realise that I was probably doing the amount of networking that I was doing because maybe my preference is to be a bit more gregarious. I knew I had loads of drive because actually people told me I had loads of drive. I knew that collaboration was something that I really enjoyed. So part of your superpower is doing something you enjoy. And then how do you just apply that to where you want to go next, because you've got to lead with your front foot.
It's interesting.
What you plug in first.
Yeah, but it is interesting looking at networking as a superpower. I'd not considered it within that realm, but actually the more you look at success at work and you use the word collaboration, does often come, doesn't it, from relationships with people you've met, stayed in contact with.
You?
Yes, that's a very good point. You might be my only one. No, slight joke. So expand a little bit more on that. So, you're in your mid-20s, mid-30s. What's your advice when it comes to networking?
So I think by broadening your networks, it's just getting to know people. Networking sounds like it's something that's really uncomfortable.
Which is why I'm interested to know more about it.
So if you put me in a room and tell me I've got to network, I'll probably freeze up and find it uncomfortable. But if I'm just left to get to know people, to kind of understand them, what their challenges are, how I can help them, how we can work together, I think that's where you start building connections and relationships with people. And it's that really helps you when, again, you want to pivot, or you're trying to create your own profile or build your own personal PR, or, understand what you could do next in your career, who could help you to get there, or who you could be helping, which indirectly helps you get there.
With networking, there's a perception that it should be in, potential client, I must go over there, or seniority. But actually, when you and I were talking earlier, it's broader than that, isn't it? It's also your peers that you're working with at that moment in time.
We're all humans, we're all people. Why don't we just get to know each other a little bit better? And if we understand each other's challenges or points of view or priorities, then I think we start to build those connections, the relationships, we work better together, we've got a better interpersonal relationship, so we can try and have the difficult conversations sometimes and still keep it in a positive place. So I just feel there's lots of opportunities to do that.
You also mentioned, I'm curious about this, profile.
Yeah.
We were just talking about then, in conjunction with networking. Expand a bit more on that. What did you mean when you were talking about your profile?
Coming back to the things I tell my younger self on how am I going to progress in my career, I think your profile is really important. Your personal PR is really important, and building up that equity that you have. And that profile that you build up through your knowledge, your skills, your experience, I think that is what will stand you in good stead for whether you are considered as the best person for the next role. Mm-hmm. And some diversity of thought comes with that too. So get that diversity of thought as a business person in an organisation so that you can add real value back. And volunteer for things. If they're looking for a volunteer to do something, people don't generally want to put their hands up. Do it. Have a go.
It makes a huge amount of sense. Makes a huge amount of sense. And I think as well, you look at the principle that sits behind INclusiverse, that therein lies a lovely vehicle with which to participate and become part of something that wouldn't be in your day-to-day sphere. But actually, coming back to profile, intros you to other people, helps you build relationships, but at the same time, this is a consistent path of learning. That's what I love about the whole principle that sits behind it. So diversity of thinking and diversity of subject matter or topic is really important, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to use the P word, but I promised myself I wouldn't. We're going to pivot. We're going to build our network connections and our profile at the same time. What else are we doing 20 years hence? 5 years hence?
When we say 5 years or 10 years hence, it makes it sound like there's a plan and it's going to be really linear. And maybe it isn't always linear. So I think be aware of the opportunities you can try and move around, maybe some kind of sideways moves that help you get to the leapfrog moment of how you're going to get across onto the next lily pad and the next lily pad to get you to the side. So to wait what the destination is, you may not know what that destination is, keep going, you'll find it. But think keeping front of mind how you become the standout candidate is really important.
Listening there to the advice that you've got, which I love because it resonates with me so much on a personal level, it appeals to whether you're female or male. Just putting a bit of a lens on it from a female perspective, especially given we both pretty much started out with automotive being a fairly central part of our lives. Automotive like tech, because Blue Square is such, it, has some amazing clients, very much rooted in technology, tends to be quite, or was definitely 20 years ago, very male dominated. Any words of advice or any observations or moments where you're like, that shouldn't have happened or wouldn't happen now, or how would I deal with it better, to make sure that there's real cut through for women moving forward now?
I think a while ago we used to think that we needed to be more like the other people in the room, and in automotive that was a lot of men. Don't do that. Like, keep who you are. You bring something that is uniquely different, a different perspective, a different maybe EQ sometimes. Just keep that and find allies who are going to help you. And I think sometimes a bit of reverse mentoring also helps with this as well, because quite often some of the people who, if you are in a male-dominated environment, they do want to help. They want it to be a bit more diverse as well, but just don't really know how to go about it, or don't really know, aren't quite as comfortable maybe communicating with you as they are with someone else that looks more like they do.
Yeah.
So I do think there's a little bit of kind of honesty and trust that you build up by having maybe a bit of that kind of reverse mentoring, so that they are better equipped to help become more of an ally for some of the younger women in an organisation who would like to kind of move on and get into the senior leadership team and have got maybe not as many as examples as they'd like to see, but it doesn't mean to say that you can't be their ally and get them to see how it is possible, how they can get there. So, and I think that applies, irrespective of gender. I think it just applies.
Oh, allyship. Everyone. Yeah, I agree. And I think bringing up allyship in the context you have is just so important. And the fact you talked about diversity of thinking, but diversity of a team is actually almost the biggest success you can bring together, isn't it? We spoke about earlier, the moving from I to we. Was there a moment in your career path, your journey, where you noticed or were conscious of that change? Was that something you'd always had an intention on very, very early on?
I think when you're at the earlier stages of career, you're all about, how am I going to get there? How am I going to stand out? And I think the moment for me when it became more about we was when I knew what my strengths were, and I also was acutely aware of what I wasn't very good at. So having those weaknesses in your blind spot is really important. And that was when I was the brand manager, product manager at Mazda. And I'm not the greatest person doing the data and data.
Oh, I might second you on that. Yeah.
So I needed someone alongside me in my team who was phenomenal at it. And I had a guy in my team who was my right-hand person because I couldn't do what he could do. And so we worked together. And it was at that point that the we really came home to me. Yeah. It's like, I need the right people within a team with me so that we can achieve it together, because I couldn't get there on my own. So I'm ever grateful to people that I've worked with along the way that we were the team and we delivered together.
And I think that's important, looking back at younger self. I think that is an important thing to acknowledge sooner and then embrace and really help drive, because you can have a career strategy, you can build the connections, but ultimately the reward comes from your role as part of a team and that shared success. And I think that's one of the things, that outside of do good, come with positive intent, which is something we're on a journey on with this learning program we're doing with Blue Square. I think that's a big thing.
Yeah.
The other aspect that you and I have spoken about, and I'd love to finish with, is this concept of, not concept, but the idea of resilience, because you really spoke to me about that in earnest. And I'm like, it's such an important point to have, again, seeded in your psyche early on that, you know, setbacks don't have to be downfalls.
So we were talking about resilience because we're going through a really, really unpredictable time at the moment. The world is changing a huge amount. The job market, it's really, really tricky. And employers are looking for unicorns, which, you know, is just also difficult to recruit because they don't really exist. And difficult if you're on the receiving end of that because you're part of something that has changed in your world. So the change that can come of whether you choose to make that change and you're choosing to pivot, or whether that change has happened to you and you've been made redundant, and there is zero stigma attached to that. The world is changing a huge amount. So if you're in control or you're not in control of that change, the sooner you get comfortable with change, the more resilience you are building. But then how can we also look at how the world is changing around us right now with regards to technology? We've got that going on right now with AI. So, and that can rock you. So, you know, you might need to dig deep into your resilience at the moment if you're looking at AI and thinking, what's that going to do? One, how am I going to work with it? And two, what's it going to do to my job? You know, one of the things that I think helped me in my career was being excited by new innovations. So when mobile came along, I was like, how could I learn as much as I could learn and surround myself with people who knew more than I did about mobile? Because they're one of the moments where you stand out. So I think there's opportunities right now with AI. What's your favorite AI tool? How have you been playing with it? Just have fun with it and enjoy it right now. And through that, you're learning. And it's through finding those efficiencies by embracing whatever the latest new technology is or transformation that we give back massively to the businesses that we work in. The kind of 80-20 rule. So 20% of your input creates 80% of your output.
Yeah.
What's the 20%? Do more of that. And then the 80% of input that isn't creating as much output, stop. Either do less of it, either use AI to help make that more efficient so that it's a quick task now, it's not taking up all that time, so that you've got more of your energy to put into the things that give a bigger output.
The creativity, the originality of thinking. There was also something we touched on earlier around resilience, which I thought would resonate. It did with me, which is, again, coming back to setbacks, that actually might be the most serendipitous, fortuitous thing in retrospect. And I think that's a point really worth making.
They're happy mistakes.
Yeah.
As long as you're learning from it, there is nothing wrong with something not going to plan or a setback or
I love that happy mistake.
They are. So I think making mistakes today in the right company that embraces that test, learn, iterate, evolve, there's going to be mistakes. And that's okay. Just learn from them. And with that learning, not only have you been vulnerable for a minute, and that's okay as well, that's acceptable, or it needs to be accepted, because otherwise how are you going to make people feel safe enough that they can try new things and fail, but fail fast and learn? But, you know, it's also filling up that resilience as well.
Oh, that's brilliant. I knew I was going to find today interesting, and I knew I was going to find today enjoyable. Tick, tick, I really have. I'm just thinking, if you're listening here, we created or are creating this series, Women in Leadership, because it's all about encouraging women to feel empowered to be who they want and to drive forward and be those future leaders. I've had the benefit of seeing some amazing women in leadership. Hello, case in point. I was curious from your perspective, whether it's the core ingredients you believe are vital or the experience you've had or being part of that make fantastic women in leadership.
There are a couple of people who spring to mind. One of them, she is so dynamic. She's called Lindsay Forster. And
Name check.
Yeah, she's a CEO of a company called Shepper. She's really good at setting the North Star, not getting caught up in the things and stuff, and communicating that in a really clear way with purpose, bringing it back to what the business objectives are, being transparent and open with how a business is performing so that everyone in that business knows exactly what they need to do. And I think it's that clarity of vision, communication, and those interpersonal people skills that are really, really essential, with a lot of bravery.
Yes.
Because she'll sit and hold her own in a room, no matter who's there. She's incredible. But while I was saying that, there was something else that also came to mind when I said things and stuff. You taught me 2 words that are super important that I've taken with me always: meaningful difference.
Oh.
So you're amazing at also cutting
I never
through
have
it.
that.
But you're amazing at cutting through.
Thank you.
And also having that purpose and that vision and that clarity. And you can also communicate it so brilliantly, but you kept bringing me back and checking me on meaningful difference at times, and that helped massively.
Oh, thank you for that. I had no idea. Seriously, we don't really sit in front of lights and things like that. And I'm so, 1, thankful you said yes. And 2, you should go away knowing how amazing you are too. So thank you. Thanks ever so much.